did reach out to her. She didn't give me her phone number.
Yeah, I've got it. Okay, if we could get started, that'd be great. We got a lot going on tonight. So this is my first meeting as mayor for a work session, and although I've chaired other work sessions as vice mayor, I did just want to have a couple comments about work sessions, and hopefully we'll look at that. One of the first things that I want to make sure is, and I had said this in our first night after I was sworn in, is I really want to make work sessions to be a priority, obviously, where we do our work, but I also don't want to be here till 9 o'clock at night. I want to make sure that our staff is taken care of and that we get to get home to our families. So it's really important at that. So a big part of that is I really hope everybody kind of regulates their comments to make sure that we are very succinct and on target of what we want to talk about. I will use the mayor chair to make sure that keep everybody on point and making sure that you're not repeating yourself. So I want to make sure that that's important, that we're doing that, because I really want to make sure we're out of here. 2 hours would be really nice, most work sessions. Although sometimes we do have discussions which are very valid and important, and sometimes it does take us a little bit of time. But I want to make sure that we are on point every time. So. The other thing I wanted to talk real briefly about was leadership or mayor-manager meetings. We met last Thursday, and we're going to continue to cycle everybody's name on the calendars, but I just want everybody to know that if you can't make it, you can't make it, so I don't want you to worry about it. Look at the calendar. If it works, if it doesn't, that's great. We'll continue to keep meeting, but I'm not going to have the staff calling or anything to make sure somebody's going to be there or not. We're just going to make sure that you guys kind of self-regulate that as well.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Having council members come to the mayor-manager meeting was something that I put in place when I was mayor, and it followed a period of time where there was some criticism aimed at the mayor and the vice mayor for sort of making decisions sort of in secret, and that their members of council kind of felt out of the loop, and that they just felt like leadership was controlling the process more than was appropriate. Now, whether that was true or not, I guess we can debate, but there was a perception at that time. And so it really was intended to be an opportunity for other members of council to kind of be a part of the planning process and kind of the long-term, this is how we're going to do this process, rather than, and it seems like it almost morphed into like a perceived obligation for some people, when it really was intended to be, like I say, an opportunity to sort of be a little closer to the agenda setting process and other things. And so I hope you all will view it that way versus, oh, here's another meeting I'm supposed to attend, because it gives you a chance to really be more involved in, like I say, setting the agenda and prioritizing things. And even though the mayor and the vice mayor don't have more voting power, there is some control over the process that we follow in terms of agendas and priorities and sequencing of things. And I really encourage you all to come as much as you can to be a part of that.
Thanks, Charlie. And so hopefully that'll be a part of it, and Carter will still continue to give us the updates from those meetings, so you guys are still in the loop if you can't make it or if you're not part of that week too. So.
And you can always trade. That's what we used to do all the time. Is I can't make it on Thursday. You want to trade with me, and that way you get to come the same as often as you would have if you followed the schedule rather than just not show up or cancel.
I have a question.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Is there a reason that you don't have it where just any council member who wants to can come and sit there and watch?
Yes.
What's the reason?
Because if more than three came, if three or more came, you'd have a quorum. And then that would require a public announcement, and really couldn't make any decisions unless one person left.
So that means the public doesn't know what goes on there either.
No.
Right, sometimes when that's a good thing.
No decisions are made. We're just setting agendas and prioritizing things.
Okay, we're down a couple of members. I know Keane's under the weather. I think Chris is coming back from Cheyenne from work, and so I think that's it. Yeah, so everybody else is here. Alrighty, let's start. Full-time municipal judge, Fleur. Yeah.
ticket.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry for on the
It was kind
agenda.
of fun
That's what
watching
it's.
her freak out a little bit. Thank you, Flor. Actually,
Mr. City Manager.
I appreciate those nonverbal responses.
That was alarming for her.
And then I got
was
scared for a
awesome.
second when she looked at me like, "What are you talking to me?"
Help stand and deliver.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thanks, Carter.
Hey, no problem, no problem. Over the past several months, we've had the opportunity to engage in a conversation with respect to the possibility of evaluating municipal court through a different lens, if you will. And that lens, as you would see on the screen here, is switching from a part-time model to a full-time model. As a part of that analysis, not only do we evaluate what strengths and weaknesses might exist with that type of discussion or approach, but also what other communities are doing that have models of this nature and what they're finding in terms of outcomes and so forth. So Flora actually helped me put together a real brief analysis for you in terms of comparing what it is that City Cheyenne does, which is obviously a comparable city in terms of size, and as you can see here, the docket that they typically entertain through their municipal court. They have been in a full-time model for quite some time, and in that particular model, the judge is the court administrator as well. And so if indeed the council decided to move in that direction, my recommendation would be that the administration portion be retained outside of the judge's oversight, if you will, and which would allow, of course, the judges to dispense cases and hear arguments and those kinds of things. In this scenario, as you can see, from a 3-year average standpoint, there really isn't a whole lot of disparity between what it is the city of Casper entertains through their court system and what it is the city of Cheyenne entertains. You will notice that the city of Cheyenne currently has a full-time judge as well as a magistrate or a part-time judge. And if indeed this model is adopted in Casper, I would recommend the same thing. However, the city of Cheyenne is in the process of migrating to 2 full-time judges, with a part-time magistrate. They also have a juvenile court model, which is really interesting, and I don't fully understand at this point in time, given the single point of entry model that we're all sort of mandated to follow in Wyoming. So I thought that was an interesting note that you should be aware of, and it does have impact on numbers, as you might imagine, when you consider the side-by-side comparison as well. I would suggest that 160,000, almost 161,000, is probably what I would consider our price point, if you will, when it comes to considering the budgetary implications with respect to either model that you prefer to pursue. You can see that in that scenario, the city of Cheyenne currently is really not too far off base with regard to what they do from a full-time perspective. There are a couple primary differences, though, that you ought to be aware of, and that is with respect to the cost of benefits. There's a lot that goes into what it is that makes up benefits when you go from community to community to community. And in this case, we considered, for discussion purposes and analysis purposes, the worst case scenario, if you will, for benefits relating to a judge and a part-time judge, so to speak, taking some level of benefits. Typically, we don't see part-time judges take benefits or part-time employees of any kind. But our cost is different than Cheyenne's, and I think that's what makes the difference when it comes to considering salary kinds of things, if indeed we're going to work with that $161,000 breaking point, if you will. And so at the end of the day, if council's comfortable moving forward in this regard, you have to be comfortable with the idea that a judge can be hired on for what it is that we're proposing in this layout. When you work backwards from that breaking point of 161,000 roughly, we would assume that a judge would take the bench on a full-time basis for, let's say, 78,000? 76,000, thank you, annually, with, of course, a fully loaded package that would add about 30-some thousand to that if they assumed all the benefits that would be available to them. And I wouldn't know why they wouldn't. And so that's how it would look like if you take our price point and work backwards from that element in bringing on a full-time judge. And so I think if that's doable, then we have a way in which budgetarily we can make that happen. The question is whether or not you get applicants for that position that is satisfactory to you in that particular environment. And that, of course, can happen regardless of what the salary picture looks like, in that you don't always get the candidates you want when it comes to applying for jobs that you might have open from time to time, regardless of where in the organization that might be. So with that, I would suggest that primary strengths as it relates to a full-time model do exist with respect to the conflict issue that many of you have heard dialogue and entertained dialogue over. Certainly over time, those conflict issues tend to resolve themselves as that individual who would be your full-time judge wouldn't effectively be in private practice any further. And so again, over the years, those conflicts would go away or wouldn't exist, and ultimately can be dealt with probably more effectively than a part-time process would allow. As you saw in the memo, we did find that over the past year, as an example, as sort of a sample year, there were probably 12 instances where one of the three judges had conflicts and needed to turn to each other for assistance, if you will, in dealing with those particular cases. And so, that's up to you to determine whether or not that's too much, or if that's appropriate, or you'd like to see difference and see that reduce if possible. We've already talked about budgetary implications and so forth. And again, I want to emphasize that having one judge, in my estimation, doesn't work. I think you will need a full-time judge as well as a part-time magistrate to help when those instances of conflict do arise, even if they are on a smaller basis. But also as vacation needs arise, as sick time issues arise, and those kinds of things, you're going to want a part-time person to fill in and be that backup for our regular judge. A couple things I'd like you to think about with respect to the full-time model as well. I did get some feedback from the judges that would indicate that alcohol court may not be a model that could be adopted as well or along with, in tandem with, a full-time model. The judges can speak to that far better than I can, and so that may be some questions you want to entertain this evening. But the other thing that might work as a disadvantage, if you will, is with regard to that burnout concept. Hopefully a full-time judge would use the part-time judge appropriately so that burnout or workload issues could be dealt with more appropriately. You probably will see an advantage, as it were, to having three judges in that regard than you would having 1.5 judges when it comes to burnout and workload kinds of issues. At the end of the day, my hope is that council will look at what it is that you would like to see as a result of your court product and determine whether or not the model that you have works in that regard, or that making a change would make more sense to a full-time model in this particular scenario. And so if indeed, for example, the conflict issue is such that does cause you some consternation and you'd like to see that removed if possible, then the full-time model makes more sense for you. If indeed you think that the conflict as we're seeing it now is tolerable and something you can endure, if you will, then perhaps a change isn't necessary. But that for you is to decide, and I think that's probably the primary factor that you're going to want to consider given the analysis that we've done with respect to strengths and weaknesses. One thing that I should say, Mayor, in closing, is that tonight does not need to be your deciding meeting as it relates to whether or not you want to move in this direction. But I do think that if you'd like to see some more information or a different analysis or additional analysis, then tonight would be a good night to give us that direction. So that if moving into a new model is where you'd like to go, then we won't, waste time in providing you information and that kind of thing, and we can move expeditiously if that's what you'd like to have happen.
I have a couple-
Questions? Yep.
I have a couple comments.
Comments,
I don't
yeah,
know
go ahead.
if they're questions so much. When you say, how many employees, full-time employees do you have that work every other month? Besides the judges?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, we don't have any full-time employees that work every other month that I'm aware of.
They all work every month?
40 hours a week.
Are they all burned out because they can't work every other month? Or is it just the judges that are worried about working every other month and burnout?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, I'm not aware of burnout issues among our employees, and if we do, we generally deal with that from a performance standpoint and get change.
Did you figure out how many hours they put in every other month? Have you figured that out?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, we from what we can tell, and Floor may be better able to answer that, and perhaps even some of the judges, but we get about 15 hours per judge per week, is that right? Or per week, I should say, of actual
20
bench
hours.
time? Okay.
During the
15,
month they
20.
work?
During the month that they work, that's right.
So they work how many hours a month?
Well, if it's 20 hours a week, we'll say, then that would be 80 hours a month.
That's the maximum. Depends on what their court load is, if everybody
Right.
pleads guilty, that kind of thing.
I would think so.
The issue, regardless of how we do it, that bothers me is I think that we have to stop the judges from handling criminal cases in Natrona County. Or any criminal case that involves where they would have to be cross-examining a policeman who works for the city or any other city employee. That's in their judicial ethics, there is a statement for part-time judges, which I think Ford put in her report, which is that they have to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And so, as Charlie pointed out earlier, one of the reasons he had invited other council members to these meetings is so to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Not that there was any, but the appearance of it. And so the complaints I get is that if a judge is over in district court doing criminal cases, I see from the letter from the district attorney that he's not in favor of that himself. So whatever we do, I think we should prohibit judges from doing any criminal cases within Natrona County or that involve any particular city employee that could appear as a witness. Because I think that if you're there and you're the judge here and they're a city employee or a witness or an officer who appears in front of them, it creates stress on everybody. So that said, the other one would be that if the judge is in some sort of civil case, that's any kind of a civil case with another attorney in Casper, and then that attorney has to appear in front of the judge with a criminal defendant, I think the judge should recuse himself from that case. And the attorneys are telling me they don't file those because they're not granted anyway. So the 12 you're referred to is the minimum. I would say if we passed a law that allowed attorneys to recuse, since we have 3 judges, to recuse a judge, I would feel more comfortable with this scenario. So if the attorney decides there's some reason this judge should be off the case, he files a motion, that judge has to sign it to another judge. Now, if you don't want to go to the full-time model, I would say that's the bare minimum we have to do to make this court avoid the appearance of impropriety. And I don't think that, and I think we should also have another rule that if a judge who's in private practice comes before the city council representing someone, that he or she be prohibited from doing that. Because I don't think that raises a very good specter either. And the third issue is that there's a statute which I asked Will to take a look at, which says that you have to give priority to people that are Casper residents to get these jobs. And I know one of the judges, I don't believe even lives in Casper. And I have never liked the idea, the city attorney we had previous didn't live in Casper. I think that we have to, if we're gonna appoint these big-time city jobs, these people should be Casper residents. And I don't know why that statute's been overlooked. But I don't think we should overlook it any longer. So then with respect to the full-time judge issue, all of the major courts are all full-time judges. And yes, you will need more than one judge. You may need 2 judges. And I think to strap it all to that budget is not fair to our citizens. I think we may have to modify some budgetary concerns so that we get a court that runs properly. I think we're collecting $1.6 million in revenue from that court. And we're not getting all of the cases that the city police make arrests in. I also think the other thing that we should do is the city police should file all cases that are misdemeanors in the municipal court. If we have jurisdiction of them, our police shouldn't be judge shopping and court shopping. They should file the cases in the city court. And now that's going to include marijuana cases, which undoubtedly there will be, I don't know what the number of that is right now, and I don't know what the average fine is right now, and I don't know what Cheyenne's revenue stream is down there compared to ours. I'd like to know that number as well, so that I can compare that, because that's an important issue as to what's happening. And I'm certainly not suggesting that I don't like quota systems in the police department, and neither does our new chief, so I'm not suggesting that. But when you're dealing with an institution that is collecting this amount of fines, and there's a certain area that I believe the statutes should say that we should be handling, and we're not, we need to review that. So part-time judges is a great deal for the part-time judges. They get $60,000 a year, supplement their income, and can practice law. That's great for them. It's not great for our citizens, and it's not great for this city council. This has gone on for years and years and years. They've done nothing wrong. I'm not insinuating that they've done anything wrong, but that old system's time has come and should be changed. And to keep us in a system that's ancient and that we've never done this before, but we've had 2 full-time judges before. And I don't know, Fleur talked to the 2 judges. Did you talk to the 2 judges that were full-time judges?
No, I did not.
So I know them both. And there's different reasons they quit. One of them, the city hired me as an investigator to find out if certain allegations of this one judge was true. And I went out and did a complete investigation, and they weren't true. But he had gotten into some beef with the city clerk, and she won. They wanted to remove him. When I gave them the advice, the city clerk should have been removed. But they didn't remove the judge. They made a deal, and he left. Another city judge that was here, he was pulled in front of the council and was told to collect more revenue. And he didn't think that was right, and that isn't right. I believe any contract we have with judges should be for 1 year, renewable at the end of the year if we decide to do it, that they can't be fired during the year unless, of course, they commit a felony or something. But they need to just simply be and adhere to the rules of ethics that we lawyers provide in these issues. And they all know what they are. You guys don't know what they are. And I'm not concerned about their decisions. I just want them to follow the ethical rules, which I think they do, but it's difficult when you're a part-time judge. Because when you're off doing things these full-time judges can't do, it just doesn't look right. So you can sit here and come up with this argument, Mr. Manager, about this budgetary concern, because I know people are concerned with that. But I think that's improper to base it on that. I think we have to, Cheyenne and Casper are totally different than the rest of the towns in this state. The law does not require city judges to even be lawyers. So, you have to bear that in mind. And if you look at what the state pays lawyers and judges, we pay way more for our lawyers and legal advice than the state pays theirs, by far. I have a daughter who's a DA in state DA in Cheyenne for that district. She's got 3 years' experience. She gets $68,000 a year. And she prosecutes felonies and all of that. The city attorney of Cheyenne, who has a great deal of experience, is getting $110,000 a year. So we're paying people well, and if you advertise some of these jobs, you will get people who are very competent that will take less money. So if you're concerned about that, if it's that you don't want to change anything, you want to leave it as it is, so be it. But it's outgrown. Times have changed, and we need to revamp our court. I don't like your idea that you're the one who administers the court either. I think the chief judge, should administer that court, and he or she won't have some of the problems, so like warrants that people have paid for and then they're getting arrested for them because the right paperwork wasn't done. That all needs to end.
Okay, I think we need to start moving forward. So, what is our pleasure? What shall we move forward with? Carter had asked if we want to have that conversation to give them direction to come up with more information for us to make a decision. What are we thinking? Unless there's any other questions or comments. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's some benefits to be had in diversity. We have said we had 13 instances where judge had essentially passed on the case to somebody else. Well, that to me is evidence that they're pretty cognizant of what their ethical responsibility is. And I also noted that the Wyoming Supreme Court Judicial Ethics Advisory Committee, in an advisory opinion 21603, had indicated that they don't see a problem with it. And seeing that our costs are competitive, I really do see some advantage in the diversity of having judges handle different cases. And it does give us a little more flexibility in their scheduling. So that's just the other side of what you're saying, and I.
Which I would then ask you just to address the issues of the representing people in other courts where we might have employees that are witnesses. That's one of the reasons I brought this up.
Go ahead, Charlie, you were next.
Well, I mean, just to go along with what Bob's saying, I don't want to argue in favor of the current system, but I guess I would like to hear the arguments for the current system. I understand your argument, Dallas, and it all makes good sense. But I don't know if we were going to let the judges to speak, or if they were prepared to speak, or
It's up to us, yeah.
I guess I would like to hear if there's an argument for us leaving things as they are. In addition to what Bob just said, which I don't know how diversity might help us, but what things are we able to do with this current system that we might lose if we went to a full-time judge?
Let's go to Amanda real quick, and then we'll come back to Charlie's.
I agree with a lot of Dallas's comments, and working in the criminal justice system in this town, there is a lot of inequity when it comes to certain things. I, for one, would like more information.
Before making a decision. Okay. Go ahead, Charlie.
I guess I would like to hear what the judges have to say. I had a municipal court meeting last week, and we kind of discussed this a little bit. So I guess I would like to hear what they think, or give some of the, some of the discussion that we had last week at the municipal court meeting.
Is council okay with that, or? Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just really quick, Mayor. I just wanted to ask Councilman Laird, how he would feel with a full-time or part-time judge. I think having a full-time and a part-time, you still have that risk of, what you're afraid of having that public perception of a conflict of interest. So, you know, is your vision having Casper have 2 full-time municipal judges, or what exactly do you want?
I think if we require the police to file all their cases that they make arrests on that are within our jurisdiction, we'll need 2 full-time judges. Now, at the very least, I would want to see a resolution that states you can't represent criminals in this county. You can't be involved in cases that involve city employees that may be adverse to you. And that we allow, if you want to keep 3 judges, and but I don't know that Bob understands this 12 situation problem really. If you allow peremptory, if they have to vacate the case because a lawyer files a peremptory challenge and it has to be given to another judge, you may be able to solve the problem that I'm really trying to get at without changing the 3-time judges, or the 3 part-time judges. So that's the problem that has to be addressed, that is giving us a black eye. And so whether you want to keep 3 judges or have 2 full-time or 1 part-time and 1 full-time or whatever, I think we have to address this other inherent problem that's been going on, and then we need to stop it.
Does that answer your question, Justin?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, great. So to go back to Sean and Charlie's suggestion of listening maybe to that, I didn't know if one, Judge Hand, you might want to. Would you like it?
Put 'em on the spot.
Well, you know, I understand the arguments on both sides, and obviously I've read the things that have been in the newspaper. I look at it from a historical perspective. My father, when I was growing up, was a part-time municipal judge, and they did essentially the same thing. There were 3 judges at the time. They rotated in every 3 months. And I was in the city attorney's office when both of the other judges were, when we had the 2 full-time judges, so I saw how that worked. My sense is that there is a significant burnout factor. And it's not just the sitting on the bench every day. The other thing that you need to understand is that when we are on the bench, we are essentially on call that month, 24/7. And we get calls at the middle of the night from the police that need issues with warrants. We have to review probable cause affidavits from the jail, things of that nature. So it is a significant chunk out of your life to do that. And I think that if you ask somebody to do that full-time, 365 days a year, that's going to be, I think there's a potential for burnout there. The current situation, to me, has the advantage of, like you say, diversity, because we do have 3 judges. So if there's any kind of a problem, we can assign it to somebody else. And I understand that we could do that to some extent if we had 1 full-time and 1 part-time. But actually the way it is now, and the PowerPoint reflected it, that we actually have a 4th person who we can call on if everybody else is tied up, that can come in, and then that person is actually paid out of our salary. Their hourly rate comes out of our salary. But there are times when we need to have warm bodies over there to handle the cases. I know last month I came down with this flu, and I was out for a day, and thank goodness I was able to get the 4th part-timer to come in. But the other thing, as far as the conflicts that I'd like to point out, is that conflicts are going to exist whether you have a full-time judge or part-time judges. It's just going to happen. You know, you've got family members, potentially you've got, you know, people from your church that may come in that you're close to. And things like this aren't going to go away just because you eliminate the part-time practice of law. Councilman Laird made a comment about attorneys are reluctant to file a request for recusal because they won't get it approved. And I don't know. I've been doing it for, I believe, 20 years now, and I can't tell you the last time I had any attorney file a request for recusal. And I can tell you that if they did, just by virtue of the fact that they filed that, I'm going to step away from the case because I don't want to have any appearance of impropriety. And again, the situation that we have now with having multiple part-timers, we've got enough diversity that somebody can step in and do what needs to be done. So,
Charlie and then Bob.
Thank you, Madam Judge. We have a lot of attorneys in Casper, and it's a competitive business, including clients, just as any other profession. Do you believe that your status as a municipal judge has been an enhancement to your private practice, that people would choose you because you have that status or that position?
well, I don't know. I suppose it's possible. My private practice is pretty limited. I don't do really a whole lot. I do some estate work. I represent the town of Midwest, and I do the criminal prosecution in the town of Mills as well, and do some stuff for them. And that's essentially what I do. You know, I've got my regular clients, and I really don't take on a whole bunch of new clients at this point, so I don't know that I can comment to that.
I guess maybe I should have rephrased that a bit. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying you don't see your status as a municipal judge as something where people would choose you to represent them.
Personally, I don't.
Because you're a municipal judge.
Yeah, personally I don't. But again, that's partially because I'm not doing criminal defense in a lot of the cases where people are out, you know, looking for an attorney.
Bob and then Dallas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that occurs to me, and I know I'm one of the senior guys in the room, but when people are trying to you know, do something different with your life or semi-retire, I would think that our pool would be this kind of a job for a guy that's been practicing law 30 years, and once he reaches 65 and gets on Medicare and got his Social Security, this might be something that really appeals to people who want to stay involved in the business that they've been in all their life. And while we haven't had that situation yet, I just see that as kind of a natural thing, that somebody that wants to retire. Have we seen, I don't know, we've seen applicants since I've been on council that were, quote, semi-retired, but I just see that as another pool of people. And their experience has got to be worth a great deal. So.
You're a good member of our.
No, I'm not a member of ARP,
So
actually.
now,
Unless there's other, I'm gonna give Dallas this last one, and then we're gonna start moving
this
forward.
judge here should be appointed the chief judge, and I'll tell you why. Because he doesn't have the conflicts, and he's been here the longest. Now, there is a little issue about being the prosecutor out in Mills, because I think sometimes, did a city employee go through Mills recently on a DUI?
I believe so, yes.
And were you the prosecutor?
Mhm.
See, now, I have to say, Judge, that's one I'd want to think about. But because I was a young prosecutor and your dad was the judge.
Right.
And at that point, I did criminal cases. I defended criminal cases. I was 25 years old, and everybody said it was okay. But times have changed. It's not okay now. So would you be interested in a full-time judge job? Now, I agree with you. I think if you had to work 365 days a year and when you were sick, you'd be burned out. But that's why I'm hopeful that the council can see that that's a ridiculous proposition, and that we probably do need, we're just like Cheyenne. They've seen it way before we have. I think we ought to have a person actually like the mayor who handles the juvenile cases, truthfully. And I think we ought to have 2 full-time judges. Now, if you want to stay in this old model, that's one thing. But what I'm wondering is, and I asked you this before, if you would, I've asked Judge Nagbar, he said he didn't want to be a full-time judge. I asked Judge Collier, she wouldn't give me an idea. You didn't say no, so I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
Well, I'll give you the same answer. I've enjoyed working for the city. I've enjoyed doing this. I take pride in what I do. It would be something that I would have to consider, but I don't know that I would want to do it at this time.
Okay, fair enough.
Jesse and then Charlie.
Thank you. I just had one quick question for Judge Hand or any of the other 2 judges in the room. Speaking to Councilman Laird's point of having staff, I guess, under you, how do you see that model? Is that something that you see as an issue, or is that something that you would actually want, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that over the years, and I don't know what the other judges' philosophy is, but my personal feeling is I would like to have some involvement in some of those things. And I point to some discipline cases that have happened over the years where people have been let go and the judges were never consulted. We've never been involved in the hiring process for court staff, and I think that it would be beneficial if we had a role in that. So I do think that there is some room for improvement there.
Mayor?
Oh, yeah,
Could
sorry.
I get one follow-up
Yeah,
maybe
you
to
bet.
the city attorney? Is there any statute for having, our judges have, you know, employees, I guess?
Councilman Morgan, I'm not aware of a statute directly off the top of my head that specifically addresses, you know, the city manager form of government council hires the manager, the attorney, and the judges as far as, and then any other city employees are technically the manager's employees.
Right.
Now, whether that's structured with judges having supervisory authority over clerks, I can't think of a statute off the top of my head that specifically addresses it.
Okay.
I'd be happy to research further. You know, in traditional, or like district court, circuit court, I think the judges tend to supervise the court staff and clerks.
Okay.
And have a managerial role in that realm, but as far as whether it's specifically addressed in meeting courts, I don't have a specific answer for it.
Okay, great, thanks.
So Charlie, Dallas, and then Sean. And then I'm serious about wrapping up.
Serious this time?
Yeah.
So I have another follow-up question, if
Sure.
I can. So, we tried this on 2 different occasions. The term burnout was used in both of those cases, and you brought it up yourself. Since our circuit court judges and district court judges are full-time, what is it that is unique about a municipal court position that increases the likelihood of burnout with that particular position versus other judges?
Yeah, well, I know I can speak to their on-call. You know, they're not on call the entire time. They rotate. They have a system where they rotate. Beyond that, I don't know. You know, they in circuit court and district court, they are going to see a lot of diversity in the kind of cases that they get. Whereas in municipal court, we see only violations of municipal ordinances. You know, a lot of traffic stuff. So there's a lot of redundancy in what we do. That I don't think that some of the other courts have that.
Dallas and Sean.
Okay. The Wyoming Supreme Court and the Constitution of the United States gives the judiciary the power and authority to control their courts. It's not by statute, it's by constitutional law. There's a bill before the legislature now that didn't get out of committee last time to make the municipal judges full-time and to make them electable, because that causes that to fall in order with what's happening in all the major courts in the state of Wyoming. That's coming. I just want to get a little advanced lead on it. And there's a reason for it, and it's all the reasons I've suggested. Because you just flat remove all of these problems with full-time judges. You can't do it with one judge. So to put this whole show on saying this is all the money we've got, I think that's ludicrous. We've got to look for other funding. We could quit giving Kate a $450 and put another $100,000 in the judges, we'd be fine.
Where do
So-
you stand on Katie again?
So with respect to
We heard that.
what Judge Hand has said, that is what they do. They do misdemeanor cases. They're general intent crimes. They're not trying first-degree murder cases that go on for 2 months and that the jury's out for 5 days. They're not trying cases where women have been raped and pillaged and all this. They're trying cases, speeding cases and these kinds of things. And yes, they do get called, but when I did call the clerk of court, there's only been like 2 warrants issued out of that court in over a year. So I don't know how many warrants there. Maybe there's more than what I was told, I don't know. Or how much time they put in it now. But I'll have to say, Judge, I don't think you're overworked. I really don't think you guys are overworked. I think that maybe some of the district judges are overworked. I know trying to get a decision out, some of them over there takes a year to do it. But here, all of these cases are ruled on at that moment in time. They've had one case appealed to the Supreme Court, and that was by me before I became a city councilman. They don't get appeals. They don't get reviewed. They're kind of running their own show over there. And so that's an antiquated system. Our people are deserving of full-time judges who are dedicated to that job and not out having to earn a living by defending other criminals and doing other cases.
Okay. Sean, and that's it. We're moving on 40 minutes on this topic. So.
The only thing I'm gonna say, I guess, is that I don't care whether we go a full-time model or stay with a part-time model, as long as our citizens' constitutional rights are protected, as long as their trials are fair, that's all I care about. I do think there is a separation of powers issue with the city council being the bosses of the judiciary branch of the city government. I do think that's an issue, but that's a state legislative issue, and hopefully they resolve that. I do remember just 3 years ago when we had the amount of people being arrested on warrants that were already taken care of and taken to jail was just disgusting, to say the least. But since we've had a change in city managers and the administrator of the city court, those things have pretty much stopped. I do see merit in having judges have some kind of role in personnel at the city court level. I do see that. I think that's something that we should look at. But really, I don't. As long as the Constitution is protected and the rights of the people are protected, I don't care if it's a part-time or a full-time model.
Great. Thank you. So I've got, Amanda had said that she would like to have more information before making any decisions. How's everybody else feel?
Same.
More information is always good.
Okay. More information?
And impact on alcohol court, because that could be a casualty, and that may, I know you've had problems with how alcohol court's been run, Dallas, but I think we should fully look at that, because that was a major initiative when we put alcohol court in place.
And I'd like somebody to tell me how that would impact alcohol court with 2 full-time judges. Because I don't see how it possibly would have any effect on it.
Could we prepare a budget on 2 judges too, just as an option?
So, and that's an important question. I think more information is great, but if I can have a definition of what that means,
Yeah.
that would be wonderful.
Well, that's one thing I'd like to see.
So Charlie had said that budget of 2 full-time, or 2 full-time judges,
And 1 part-time, right?
And
Because we
impact
still-
of alcohol court.
and the impact of alcohol court.
Okay.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, the other thing I haven't heard some of the councilmen address is whether or not they approve of the judge doing criminal cases in other courts where they may be cross-examining our employees.
Hence why I said I agreed with you.
You kind of, but no one else has addressed it. Maybe okay with it, but maybe not be, but I can't read minds.
I see the potential problem.
Should be stopped. Should be stopped tonight. They should do it on their own.
Any other information that we need, or we'd like to give direction for the staff?
I wonder if we could get a statement from the judges as to the criteria they use to recuse themselves, so that we could get some sense of consistency on that. So that if we do stay with the part-time judges, we have essentially some guidelines that they're following to self-police themselves and make sure that these things don't.
And I know one incident where a motion was filed for a judge to recuse himself and he didn't do it. So they just don't do it automatically.
To give you enough information, Mr. City Manager?
I've got 3 elements of information that I'm following up on, Mr. Mayor. A budget proposal for 2 full-time judges, an analysis of how alcohol court could be impacted, if at all, and criteria that the judges use to determine the appropriateness of recusal. Right.
Jesse, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to see possibly the structure of how we would have the clerk and other staff at the court, whether it's a dotted line to the judges or I guess it wouldn't be a dotted line at all to the council members, but it's just interesting on how that concept would work and how we can make that happen. And then also a solid number on how much the court brings in in fines.
Compared to the
Solid
one in
number.
Cheyenne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing, don't we just have one courtroom?
We have three.
Okay, I have it up there, thankfully, for,
There's plenty of courtrooms in the Trona County.
all right,
believe me.
so there's no problem with facilities then, okay, just wanted to cover all bases.
All right.
If I
Anything
may,
else?
Jesse, that was, your question was kind of related to what's your house, city attorney, right?
Yeah.
Can we,
Right.
yeah, so that'll have to be researched too, what the mechanics would be.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, let's move forward. Vet policy guidelines status update. Mr. Myers? Or is it you
Yeah,
again?
why don't I lead off and, yeah, you bet if that's okay. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you know, we've been working on an event policy proposal, if you will, for some time. And we have certainly distributed copies of an initial proposal, or a draft, if you will, to a number of stakeholders around the community, and certainly all of you, somewhere around the beginning of December. And we have had the opportunity to take feedback, a lot of it on a sort of informal basis where folks email and call and those kinds of things. And most recently, with regard to more organized sort of input gathering, we had a meeting the other day where that process was initiated. That aspect of the process was initiated, if you will. As you saw in your memo, we are taking various questions and commentary about major aspects of the policy that you should consider as it relates to an eventual proposal that you adopt. And certainly, I would suggest that the opportunity to hear the formal proposal is not what tonight was designed for. We are not prepared to say, this is what we recommend, and this is the culmination of all the data that we've gathered from the public for you to consider yes or no. And so be aware that really tonight is for the purpose of telling you where we're at, giving you some insight with regard to the comments that we've taken thus far, and to let you know that the public input process is continuing. We have a meeting, as an example, coming together. I don't know where exactly it is in the scheduling magic that happens, but as an example, food trucks is something we need to talk further about, and we plan to have a meeting specifically on coming up here soon. Another topic that I think we should talk more about is with regard to the larger events and some of the details that the policy suggests that surround those kinds of items should be discussed further as well. So if questions are needed for this evening, tonight would be certainly great from among the council. But with regard to council needing to pass something and drop the gavel on particular questions of that this policy would suggest at this point, I would say is premature. And so, but feedback that you would have at this point as well, that we would build into the input gathering process would certainly be appropriate also.
Thank you. Sean and Amanda.
I do think the food truck issue is something that needs to be addressed sooner than later before it gets out of control. I've been getting contacted by a lot of food vendors in these past couple of months, and it's something that we need to figure out probably by the next work session, in my opinion. We need to discuss and figure out what we're going to do with it.
Complaints about food trucks?
Yeah, about how do we regulate it? There's really no regulation on food trucks in the city right of ways and things like that. So I think we need to have that discussion and come up with a policy.
Amanda and Dallas.
I have been contacted by the other crowd apparently who want them to stay. So I agree with Sean that it's a big issue that we need to figure out sooner than later for our sanity, if nothing else. I'm curious, how are you gathering information from the community? Is it a formal process or informal? What does that look like?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, actually it's a culmination of both formal and informal, if you will. Like I said earlier, we've been taking emails quite regularly over the past several months on that issue as well as others that the policy covers. And I would remind you, the policy is much more circumspect than just food trucks. Right? And so I hope that you'll evaluate the policy through that lens as well. But we also are trying to organize stakeholders to gather input and policy proposals in like a formal meeting setting as well, outside of your venue, your forum, before we, present something more formal.
Thank you.
Dallas and then Bob.
I like food trucks. I think they're a good idea. I think it's a cool deal for our downtown. And like Carter, I went by and talked to everybody. I was hoping they'd work it out themselves, because I knew if they didn't, they're gonna get a big old fat bunch of regulations. I looked at the deal you guys have proposed, Carter. I think it's convoluted and unworkable. I think it's just not a fair thing to be doing. I think that you control this event thing. I think you're right on how you're handling the event. An event isn't every night and just one business, because it affects everybody's business, affects everybody's parking. And the other thing I don't like is the idea that you would think you would have to hire an employee to do this. The employee we should hire is another judge, not a guy that goes around monitoring
Cato
food
money.
trucks. More money from Cato we could use for that. But I would like to see, I've read the cases on this. Chicago was in a big fight legally with all the food trucks. And I've heard from the food truck people, I've heard from the downtown people. I understand the downtown people. They don't want all their parking places taken up. They see a drop of income. The one thing that wasn't addressed that I think we should all be interested in, are the food trucks paying sales tax? Is there a tax associated with what they're selling, the same as in a restaurant?
You're getting the head nods over there by the food vendors.
So I haven't seen any returns on how much sales tax they pay. I'd like to know that. I'd like to know what benefit is from the city. I think if they want to park down there and run a business, they need to pay to park down there and run a business, just like the other businesses that are down there. They have to have licenses. They collect their sales taxes. They report it to the city. I don't think the food trucks should be treated any differently or any more harshly. I do think that that area of 2nd Street is probably one of the most congested areas to have food trucks sitting in. And I guess the fire department and the police department aren't in favor of having it out in the alley. I thought maybe out in the alley isn't a bad idea. But I also think that there should be a time limit on it. I don't think they should be able to shut down the parking spaces all day long until they open and let the food truck come in. I think signs should be put up telling the people you need to move your car at whatever time the food truck's coming in legally. So I think there are fine tunings. I just think it's fine tuning. But to that 38-page document, I spent time reading that, and I'm going to have to read it again. But any layman that reads it, God help them.
Bob, can I jump in real quick before you go? The only thing that I would want to say is that I think I don't know what's right or what's wrong, but what I'll tell you is that downtown is thriving. And if you go down to Sean's establishment, there are a lot of people there on those nights. Something that you haven't seen. I think that has to be recognized. So something good is happening. So I hate that we are regulating and doing that and stifling entrepreneurism in business. So that has to be recognized. So thanks, Bob.
Yeah, I did see in the MVPP the situation that, this is basically addressing public parking spaces as I understand it. But we still have the issue that would probably come more under the special events thing where somebody has arrangements to either lease, borrow, steal, or beg a parking spot from a private entity. And the other thing, the thing that has not been addressed in that respect is, do they have to provide access to restrooms? We have not required that in the past. When we set up trailers out at the pump house, they obviously have restrooms available there. There's a public restroom available there. But if they park in some parking lot where they make an agreement with the owner, it's just one more thing, an adjustment, as you say, that we have to look at. It's a complicated issue.
Sean, I don't like regulation either, but when it comes to public property and public parking, then there has to be something.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
And I think Dallas is right, there needs to be fine tuning. I like food trucks. I don't want to stifle any type of anything. It's not my thing. As long as I want things to be fair, I want to make sure that the public property is used in a fair manner, and that everybody gets their fair shake at whatever they do. We use that public space for. So.
Jesse and Charlie.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question for the city manager. How does this tie in, or does it tie directly into having our downtown cafes? Because that would be occupying, a parking space. So I think, both of those could probably be addressed, maybe even at the same time, especially if there's going to be an urgency for it when people do take parking space for whatever use that they have. Outside of food trucks and brick and mortar, there are nonprofit organizations within the city of Casper concerned about even hosting an event at all if we put this policy that's been presented in place. So I'm glad that you're going to reach out and get additional public input. That's all I have. Thank you.
Charlie and Amanda.
Thank you, Your Honor. It seems to me that when the original event permit was put in place, there was an intent that they had in mind that they didn't clearly describe. And that's one of the problems. It's not about creating more regulations, it's about clarifying what was the original purpose of that permit. And it left a bunch of loopholes, basically, which is how it's been used. So I think we should clarify, to me it's a two-step process. Rewrite the event permit so that it says what they intended it to say, which is events. And then have a separate food truck permit process where we discuss all these issues. We try to encourage food trucks, but also make sure that it's done in a way that is fair to our existing brick and mortar businesses. And so I'm not sure how we go about that and how close we came with this draft. I need to reread it too, because there's a lot to it. But to me, it's a two-stage process.
Amanda.
Currently, as the policy is written, nonprofits don't have to have food inspected by the health department when they're doing an event. I would hope that would change.
Any other comments? Yeah, Chris.
Sorry, I missed most of the first part of this, so, but I think what Jesse said is kind of key to the whole thing. It's taking the parking places downtown, and then of course there's the aspect of competing businesses, but maybe that's just fair market. But taking the parking places downtown, what the permitting is going to be and what the regulations are, it doesn't matter if it's a truck or if it's a patio that you build out there, I don't think. So maybe those two need to dovetail.
Anything else? You don't need any direction from us, right?
I think this is good. We just wanted to kind of give you an update as to what's happening, Mr. Mayor, and we'll take other questions.
Okay, great.
Could I get an exact status on what is it you're doing now? To say he wants to bring a food truck over there Friday afternoon, what are you not doing that now, or?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, if there were to be a request of that nature, basically what they would do is come down to the clerk's office and seek a permit that would support that kind of thing. We'd go through that evaluation there at that level.
So, I'm not sure what's the evaluation about? What are you evaluating?
Well, you're identifying the problem that we're facing, Mr. Councilman. Upon issuing a food permit, an event permit recently, we encountered quite a bit of feedback that was not in support of that. And so the difficulty that staff has at this point is there isn't a lot for them to draw upon in terms of evaluating whether or not that permit is appropriate to be issued, particularly when it comes to using public assets like parking in order to facilitate that event to happen. Furthermore, the difficulty we have as well is we don't know what level of notification has taken place with neighbors, and consequently we have to assume that none has.
So you're just shutting them down right now?
No, I'm not saying that, but I am saying we have revoked a permit along the lines of getting feedback that was contrary to the intent of the permit that was initially distributed. And so we are appealing to a policy approach that would help us to have more tools to evaluate these kinds of requests coming forward. And I can tell you, when it comes to food trucks, there is a lot of conversation to be had, a lot of feedback to be given, and a lot of discussion that isn't just in the downtown that needs to be evaluated. And so we're at a disadvantage from a staff standpoint in terms of issuing these things, in that we don't have a lot of direction, and we're trying to correct that, even though it seems that it's convoluted right now with the draft that we're putting forward.
So let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say a guy decides he wants to have a food truck in front of his place for 3 hours Friday afternoon.
Right.
Would he get it?
Well, it depends. I mean, if the question were posed to me, I would want to know what the neighbor's perspective is with regard to that happening.
They all say, no, we don't want you to do that.
They might. They might.
Let's just assume for the facts they do say that. Then what do you do?
Well, then I would have to say, if in fact the neighbors are upset about it, I don't want to use a public asset to create that disharmony in that particular aspect of our community. And so, yeah, my inclination would probably be to not extend that permit.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that regard, I think it's perhaps a bigger issue than we might think, just food
Right.
trucks. Food trucks they're the point of the sword right now, but bottom line is, if I have a trailer that I sell women's clothing out of and I park in front of a store down there that sells women's clothing, they're gonna be upset. If I wanna go down and sell balloons, they're gonna be upset. Or if I wanna set up an art shop on the street, they're gonna be upset. So it's
Right.
not just food trucks.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the policy has to be somewhere along the line. Somebody sometimes has to make a judgment call, and it may be made, as you've indicated, based on what your neighbors say. You know, if you get 4 or 5 people to sign off and say, yeah, I wanna do this, but let me do something with you, there might be some common ground there.
Yeah.
So,
And Boulder has such an ordinance if you wanted to have city attorney review the ordinance.
Okay. Go ahead, Jesse.
Not really a question, just, I guess, an observation. You know, what if we were talking about having certain restaurants or businesses that are currently downtown, they have a long history of closing down at maybe 5:30, and then you have food trucks that are coming in at 6 o'clock, and then all of a sudden they see this increased traffic, and then you see those businesses now opening or closing later, like at 9 o'clock. Would we start trying to regulate their
I don't wanna
hours
go there.
of operation? I'm just saying, I mean, you gotta look at both sides of the story, and we gotta make sure that we're being fair to both sides,
Yeah.
and as it stands now, it kinda seems one-sided to me.
This is why we need a whole topic to discuss this.
I don't think everybody should be able to just veto it. I think that precludes the other guy from having a fair shot at business. I think there has to be a middle ground there, in my opinion.
Any other comments? Charlie?
Well, I agree that we're not anywhere close to deciding on anything. But in deference to Mr. Steensland, who says we dither, I guess you didn't use that word, but that we take too long to make decisions. I understand they're in uncomfortable position, Mr. City Manager, and this council, I think, really has to get serious about working with that proposal, or writing a different proposal, giving the city manager some direction as to what we wanna see, and get this solved. Because it's been difficult for everybody concerned. And it's difficult for people that are trying to, it's difficult for the food truck operators, it's difficult for the brick and mortar places, it's difficult for our city staff, and we just need to come up with what are the next steps for us to work towards some kind of solution. And if we do something and it doesn't work or creates some unintended problems, well, then we come back and fix those.
Chris? Since I did come in late, it sounds like you would like some direction right now on what to do in the meantime before we can formalize a policy, right? Because it sounds like you're stuck. I don't, we don't really know how to authorize and not authorize.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I certainly agree that that would be ideal, but I also recognize the position you're in, which probably isn't a whole lot different than mine in terms of making decisions with those kinds of characteristics at play. And so what we hope to do is bring a proposal that at least recognizes the input that's out there and see if we can't find a middle ground, which I acknowledge doesn't exist right now. The sides are embattled on both ends. And Councilman, if you're hearing one side, it's not because staff is trying to deliver it that way. We're getting both sides, I promise you. And we're trying to find that middle ground. So if council is comfortable issuing some direction tonight, we would definitely take it, but I recognize that that might not be feasible.
Well, it won't be well thought out, but it'll give you the opportunity to put a tracks together. So, you know, what would be wrong with us saying issue the permits as you had been on Friday and Saturday and Wednesday or something like that? Give you a narrow time frame. It's not gonna please everybody. That's not what's gonna happen. It's not gonna completely shut things down until a well thought out plan can be put together.
I have a comment on that. I think they add to the vibrancy of the city. On the other hand, I see the issue because the food truck has to be parked on city property. And taking up those parking spaces, and we went through all that with Cersei's request down at the Wonderbook. So I think that the manager is cognizant of those problems, that this gentleman built a facility with no kitchen. On the other hand, down the street, Cersei built the same facility with the kitchen, and he would, I'm sure, would not want a food truck parked out in front of his business where he's selling hamburgers. And so then the people with restaurants, they have their kitchens, they're selling food. I'm sure Mr. Houck wouldn't like it if we permitted all of their restaurants to serve beer. They all put in beer either, if they didn't have the right license. So somewhere though, there has to be a balance for all this so we can be fair to all their citizens. I think shutting one person down isn't the answer. I think figuring out a fair and equitable way to do it, that's because the citizens like it, so we have citizens that like it, and I completely understand what people in the restaurants are saying around there. And then the people who are not in competition with food don't like their parking places to dry up either. So, Mr. Manager, that's why we hired you, paid you big money to figure it out.
Work your magic.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I'd like to propose it in the interim. And I guess absent hearing anything different, we say after normal business hours, after 5 o'clock, Friday and Saturdays, they go through the committee process that they had done before, until we get a policy well thought out and put together, and still allow things to continue. They won't continue as they had been, but then we can connect all those dots that you're talking about and make the best plan we can come up with. But I'd recommend that we let them do it Friday and Saturday nights after 5.
After all the other businesses are closed.
Presumably,
The
I know
only
some
restaurant
still-
I know that's open right directly across the street is Charlie T's. I think Jackie closes hers down, the one around the corner closes down, but then you've got the new one, the Brandon Iron down the street, it's open at night. One of the bars open at night, I don't know what input they have.
We're just talking short term until we get a.
How
full
many
policy.
hours would you say let them stay open?
I wouldn't cap it.
5 to 8? 5 to 7?
Why cap it?
I wouldn't cap it. I would let them run, because if the liquor stops selling and they no longer want the food, or the vendor no longer wants to be out there because the people have gone away, I would just let the market
Why do we
decide
cap
that.
hours on Sundays? The businesses can figure this stuff out themselves. We don't need government interference.
You do cap them on Sundays.
So I know, I'm not saying why do we do that. It's
Okay,
my
so
question.
so we've got Chris came up with an idea. Is there support for Chris?
I
Till we
support-
come up
I
with
support
a-
that general idea.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
With the clear promise that we're gonna stay with this.
We're gonna
We're gonna do something.
do something, yeah, we have to figure something out.
Okay, great. Give you a little direction.
You betcha. Thank you.
But Mr. Manager, if I'm gonna pass a bill like that, I want it 90 pages, 30 isn't enough. Because I've got lawyer buddies out there that wanna work on this thing.
Yeah, I bet.
They charge by the word.
All right, thank you. Carter, Mr. Napier's got council retreat setting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to get a little direction with regard to setting a time period that we could entertain a retreat with all of you. And for those of you that I haven't visited with yet on an individual basis, the large sort of more circumspect agenda that I'm envisioning for this meeting would be, one, to deal with a strategic plan and put something in place, and two, to deal with some of the dynamics of the body, if you will, that we need to talk about also. And so, again, two major sort of sweeping pieces that we're anticipating accomplishing in the retreat. However, I'm not real sure what it is that council would be willing to dedicate toward that effort in terms of time, because I recognize that many of you have jobs and you got commitments and obligations and may not want to take up a Saturday, and et cetera, et cetera. And so if I can get some broad direction in that regard, that'll give us some things to shoot for in terms of setting up a meeting and preparing an agenda and getting ready for that discussion.
Ideas, thoughts?
I don't know how long you're intending to have this last. Could you tell me? Is it an 8-hour deal?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, I've certainly seen them take 8 hours, and I would say that we've got some things we got to work through, and so it could conceivably take 2 hours, which means if you can give me a 4 hours one night and 4 hours another, or however you want to break it out is fine with me. But 8 hours, 4 hours. I mean,
I'm a kind of guy that would like to get the thing over with in one fell swoop if it's not too overly. But I don't want to get overworked, having to work 8 hours. You know what I'm saying?
What did we do last time? Does anybody remember how much time we spent?
It
Pretty
was a
much
day-
8 to 4.
Yeah, it was a day long.
Yeah, it was like 8 to 4. I thought over it.
With a lunch,
Yeah.
working lunch.
And I'm good with it. I'm good with it.
okay.
Chris.
I'm apprehensive. It seems that we spend more time talking about things than doing things, and I don't know why this would be any different unless we had bullet point action items. No painting rocks, coloring on the walls, any of that stuff. If it's not going to be a meeting with a strict purpose and an outcome, I don't want to participate.
And I'm glad you said that, Chris, because I had that conversation with Carter's when he was presenting that I wanted it. And a retreats, we had kind of talked about that word retreat, more of a planning session that has that direct purpose, that doesn't waste your time. Just say, come in here, this is what we need, this is how we address those things, and it's worth your time to be able to do that. So I appreciate that comment tonight. I think that's Carter's hope, to do that for us. If that helps a little bit.
And we don't, I think I can speak for Councilman Wallace, we don't want somebody to get up there and read stuff to us.
Well said.
Give us the reading in advance.
So I guess first things first is looking at the schedules. Hopefully that we'd be able to have the opportunity to take a half a day or a full day. What's more realistic for everybody to be able to do that? Because I know everybody's schedules are different to do that. And I know your schedule's really tight, Chris.
I would like to see bullet points on topic items, or we can't make a decision. I don't think you can make a decision on it unless you know what the depth of conversation is going to be.
Does Saturday work for everybody? Doing it on a Saturday?
Saturdays are rough.
You can't do it on a Saturday.
Go ahead, Jesse. Have a comment.
Yeah, just one. I was curious on what day we're thinking, evenings or weekends or what. Saturdays are open.
I think doing it on an evening, you'll have people sleeping and not paying attention. Myself.
What are you thinking? What have you done in the past? Let's start with that.
Thank you,
Because
Mr.
you've done this
Mayor.
probably quite a bit. I imagine.
Absolutely. I've certainly seen a couple evenings kind of conterminous with each other. I've seen an evening with a Saturday sort of, half a day approach as well. I've not seen it where people can come in the middle of the day on, say, a work week. Generally speaking, it hasn't been real acceptable for councils I've worked for in the past. A mix.
In Dallas, you like one fell swoop,
Well.
but that would be hard
may
for
not
during
be,
the day.
And Councilman Johnson can't do it on a Saturday till, about 5 o'clock?
Depends on the month. Whatever my nights or days.
So, but anything long at night, if anybody's working and wanting to eat in and then come over there at 6 o'clock and go to 10.
Right. That'd be hard. Okay. So
So we got nothing so far.
I think as far as the agenda, Chris, I think we had a strategic plan that was adopted by a previous council. And I don't have a problem with it, but there are people that are now a member of council that weren't part of that process. And so the first order of agenda is to retire the strategic plan that's currently in place and write a new one, so the public knows what it is we're trying to achieve. And it may be something different than what we wrote last time. Because I've used that as a guideline to my decision making, and it's part of our the monitoring of our work, where we say, this is us following that plan.
I don't think I have a copy of that.
I don't know if there was much.
If there's
And we
a
have
strategic plan that
got
was
2
developed,
rocks.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see what was done at the last one of these.
There were notes written up, but I don't know that I have a copy of it.
I don't think they were ever shared.
Yeah.
You're talking about our last one, right?
That one.
Public safety and infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then guide decision-making around those things first.
Maybe staff should develop a strategic plan. Put it in writing. Give us a nice, they do wonderful presentations. They give it to us, we read it, we see what they want, because I really don't have a clue what we're gonna even do or say in this thing.
I think it's our responsibility as the
Well, yes, but I think the
executive
form.
to come up with a strategic plan to
Well,
guide
but-
staff, not
but
staff.
The staff generally
But I would like to see a model of it, is what I'm saying. I don't have to adopt it, but I wanna see a model strategic plan for cities, get an idea of what we're gonna do, then I know I can focus my attention on what needs to be tweaked and changed for the city of Casper. But to just not ever see a blueprint makes no sense to
Can
me.
bring up the old one.
Well, we never posted it like we have in the past, and I'm not sure why we didn't get around to that, but.
Okay, so I
we
got,
should. Sorry.
I got Jesse, Chris, and then Charlie.
Thank you, Mayor. I think having a strategic plan based around the budget would really define everything that we're trying to accomplish being on this council. And I'd much rather spend 4 to 8 hours talking about fiscal year 19 as opposed to, what do we really want to focus on? It's everything that we've already talked about. It's public safety, infrastructure. I think we're already there. We already have that guideline. But talking about the budget, KPIs that we'd possibly like departments to hit in terms of how it's drawing down our general fund year over year is something that we need to discuss, and having that in place would really help staff in that regard too. That'd be helpful.
Carter, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, to give you sort of a broad view of what I hope we can accomplish as it relates to the strategic plan in particular, my hope is that you can give us sort of the overarching goals that you would like to see the city accomplish. It could be financially related, it could be related to a police department structure. I mean, that's kind of a project goal, but there's a lot of things that you can identify to staff that says, these are the goals we want you to achieve, and when we want you to have them done. What we do with that information is we take it forward to our department heads and we say, here's the overall end results that the council wants to see. Staff gets the opportunity to identify the means by which we will get there. And then when we have that whole proposal put together, after all that information that we collect from you, we bring it back to you. We say, this is what we've got. Tell us what you think in terms of your strategic plan. And if it doesn't comport with what you envisioned or what you initially thought was the case, then we adjust and we go from there and ultimately get you to adopt what reflects your vision.
Just to follow up, I just wanted to say that defines more than what we discussed last year, so I appreciate you, I guess, of what you expect a retreat to be.
Thank you.
I don't think we received that type of guidance.
Agreed. Chris?
I know that you asked for meetings, and I did not sign on for one because I wasn't fully sure what it was gonna be about, and so
Sure.
there's no sense me thinking it up while we're talking. What would be wrong with each and every one of us putting together our top 10 priorities, take those, consolidate them. I suspect that they'll overlap in many areas, or there'll be things that we didn't think about. And then we can discuss those at a work session to put together an agenda. Does that work? Is it missing what you're looking for?
Well, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, that really is consistent with a lot of the individual conversations that we're having. I'm trying to get council to identify what they view as some of the major priorities, not only from a strategic plan perspective, but from a mechanics perspective as well, so that we can have some opportunity to work through some of those logistical kinds of issues also. An example of that would be the conversation that we've had about whether or not council should serve on exterior boards as one discussion point. And so that would be a bullet point that you would see on the agenda. And so you're hitting the nail on the head. Those priorities are what I'm hoping you're thinking about and bring into our one-on-one conversations that will then help me to develop that bullet point list agenda, if you will, to govern and structure our retreat around. Accordingly, if I may add just real quickly,
Yeah, go ahead.
It's the strategic plan that helps us to set budgetary priorities that we use as a driving tool to develop a budget to also bring forward for council's adoption or adjustment as necessary. So it has a lot of meaning to us.
Go ahead, give follow.
I just want to follow up on
Yeah.
it. But the thing I was thinking is if we all brought those in there, I want to see all 10 that Ray has, all 10
Sure.
that Dallas and Jesse has, and because maybe it's, I had never even considered that. The whole package, not just the consolidated ones that we all overlap on.
Go ahead, Charlie.
To me, having done a couple of these, if I did it in isolation, it would come out very different than if I did that through the interaction. And so there was value from hearing from people, because I get to know you all a certain way in these meetings. It's a little different when you take some time and you really focus on these things more in terms of a long-term discussion and hearing why people are doing this and why what you see, where you see Casper going. So to me, the meeting, I mean, the word retreat just has a lot of bad connotations for people.
It does for me, yeah.
And it does for all of us, because we've been to
Kumbaya.
really bad ones where, with all cutesy stuff. And I just think of having some time set aside to do a long-term planning process where we hear from each other and bounce ideas off each other. I think you end up with a better product than people in isolation saying, you know, these are my priorities, let's see if we can sort all of this out.
Yeah, my point was do that first and then try and get a main topic area for it, not being the meeting or replacing the meeting.
I'm fine with that.
Have you gotten to me yet?
No, Bob, and then you.
Couple of
I
suggestions.
didn't move you, I didn't move you, I promise.
Well, we started out looking for a time and date. What I might suggest, first of all, for a time and date, I know we have pretty full work session agendas, but do 2 consecutive work sessions, Tuesday, Wednesday.
You bet. Thank you.
We'll do 3 hours a night, whatever it takes. And I'll bring a burger if that's what you want. The other one, I think we need to look at what council has done, because we've got 3 generations of, whether they call it strategic plans or what you're gonna do tomorrow, it's planned. We've got 3 generations that have been generated by council, by 3 different generations of council people. I think it would behoove us to look at what we did.
Sure.
Because last year was significantly different than what we've done before. We actually had lists of things we wanted to do before. The other thing we have is we have a long-term capital budget. We have a 5-year spending plan for capital. That, in effect, is a plan. If you're gonna allocate money to it, that's a plan. And so I think we need to take just a quick review of that. That becomes part of the planning process, part 2 of what you're talking about. Part 1 is mechanics of how council works. And in that mechanics, I think we might want to review how we do it and what is in our rule book. We might want to have somebody come in from, say, the Wyoming Business Council, explain how the Business Council works. Because it's not like you just drop your name in the hat to get money out of the Business Council. There's a process that has to go through for each governmental agency. And I would think 20 minutes or 30 minutes of that explanation from somebody at upper levels of Business Council would be helpful to council. We depend a lot on those dollars. And NDOW is kind of the same thing, but I think Business Council is probably a little closer to home for what we do. So, anyway, thank you.
Go ahead, Dallas.
So, if I don't know how to do up an oil and gas contract, if I've never seen one, I find a template for an oil and gas contract. So I look at it and see what's in it, and then I tailor it to Wyoming law. So here, what I'd like to see is what a strategic plan looks like that has been developed by competent people, so that I can get an idea in my head where I have to focus and what I have to do. You said you're talking about that issue of that I brought up many times about councilmen serving on boards and becoming biased towards the board. I'd kind of forgotten about that, but that is something. The other one is that to look at, it's to get in the right mindset. It's to think that nothing is sacred when you examine something. If we examine CADA and nothing's sacred, you just examine it the way you should examine it without being attached to it, or you want to examine what Mr. Hopkins was talking about, to come in with that kind of a mindset where you look at everything very fairly without a bias as best you can. You might get somewhere, because then I hate hearing, well, we've never done it this way before. Every time I hear that, it's like somebody scratching across a chalkboard and you want to stay in the 50s. So I don't want to come to one of these meetings and spend a lot of time getting nowhere. I'm kind of like Chris. I don't think anybody really wants to do that. But if I knew what the top priorities were of this city, where we spend money, where we have to absolutely have money, and what priorities are that we want, where we're hemorrhaging money that we shouldn't be, where we should reallocate funds, that's the kind of thing I'm really interested in. When I came on this board, somebody called me from the chamber and says, "What's your I didn't see a website like Jesse has, and now you have." I've been going to do that, I just haven't got around to it. But she said, "What is your strategic plan?" I says, "I have one strategic plan right now, and here's what it is: to see this budget balanced by the end of the year." Thank you for doing that. That was my strategic plan. I have some other ideas that I would call strategic. Everybody does. And I do like the idea of listing what you think your personal strategic plan is, and then come in and everybody discussing them and finding out realistically what we can do. But I'd like to see a template. Mr. Manager, I know you have this in your head. I don't have it in my head. If I could just even look at an outline of, here's what we're gonna discuss during these places. Here's one that's been reduced to writing by some innovative city. And then here's what they do, because I don't think in many events, the council is aware of their duties, of what the statutory duties they should be following. And I want that to, I told Lubin long ago, I'd like to have a little 3-ring notebook that all the council had, where you had the statute in front of you the other night when we were voting on the issue of the bids. So you could go bids, and you could go like this, and you could see, did we follow all these rules? That doesn't exist right now. I've suggested it many, many times. But if we had that, and you could turn, here's who we can give money to, and it's right there. And you have your own checklist as a council person to know you're following the law that's prepared by the city attorney's office. And there is such a manual, but it doesn't contain any citations, and it doesn't contain any forms. But the council needs to know when these things are happening and they're sitting there, and a lot of times people don't want to ask questions. I think the only dumb question is the one that somebody doesn't ask, personally.
Okay, so we're talking about the retreat, so let's go back really quick.
And this we would do in the retreat.
Right, oh, I see, you wanted that in the retreat.
I'm trying to remember, I think we got sort of an executive summary, didn't we, from the last one?
We
Let's
got an
just,
email executive summary.
let's just print that out.
It's out there somewhere.
Let's just print that out and have that for,
Well, plus
our
the-
next
the
pre-meeting.
ones that we had on the wall too.
It's in the cloud.
Yeah, so we can all look at it and say, this is how it turned out last time. And that'll give us a
You love-
template
you
for how
betcha.
to follow.
I'd
Not a
love-
problem.
So Carter, then, we kind of have an idea now how it's framed. Does the council, I heard Bob say, council, or our work sessions, having it during that time,
I like that idea.
where we would have those meetings. Do you guys feel okay with doing something like that?
Back to back.
2 consecutive Tuesday,
We lost
Wednesday.
Jesse.
I'm fine
He's
with
not
that.
answering.
Okay, thank you.
Does that give you enough?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly what I need.
I can't do anything Tuesday and Thursday nights, because I'm in council meetings on Tuesday nights, so I can't be at any strategic meetings.
Thursdays, you got bowling.
Thursday nights we tape report to Wyoming.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Okay.
And the retreats are open to the public in the meeting.
Yep.
Public meeting.
All right, so one of the things that's gonna be on here, whether it's gonna be on a lot or there'd be much discussion about it, I did wanna have a legislative update just because of the importance of this year. So, Charlie, I don't know if you have anything
Well,
to update or
I-
talk about that meeting?
First off, I appreciate that everybody was able to come to our meeting with the representative. I thought it went very well. I thought they were interested in what we had to say, and I hope it gave everybody the sense that our input is not only tolerated but desired, and we need to stick with that now that we have some maybe stronger relationships. So we went through all of the legislative agenda items, so I don't think there's any reason to go through all of those again. But you know, for those of you who haven't been close to this process, things when the legislature convenes evolve very rapidly, and decisions are made, and sometimes they're forced to make decisions without really having as much time as they would like to examine the consequences. And so a phone call or an email saying, please keep this in mind, you know, that this is something that, how this might affect us, can be very important. And so I think we just need to be poised to be active participants and not spectators. So
Carpools to committee meetings too, Charlie, I
Pardon?
think. Carpools to committee meetings. If you find out or somebody finds out there's a committee meeting that we're interested in, we need to head down there at 0700 and be there.
But haven't they ruled they're taking no public input?
And sometimes they
They
are,
will.
sometimes.
They have that. There's no public input on this, what Wham wanted to present.
There wasn't any today.
For this particular meeting. So, but they did take written comment from us, so anyway, let's just stay involved, and I will try to keep you all informed as to when the committee meetings have place. I can't remember when my next WHAM board phone conference is, but it's in the next week or so. And then just a reminder to everyone that the WHAM conference itself is scheduled February 21st to the 23rd in Cheyenne. And so, again, a chance to build some relationships with people that have similar responsibilities to ours, kind of learn how they've solved problems that they've encountered that aren't often that different from ours, and then get some really very useful training on ethics and infrastructure development and all the different things that are presented at a WAM conference, which are, as Jesse knows from going, they're numerous, and we end up making tough choices as to what to go to, but it's worthwhile in terms of the incidental contacts that you have with other municipal leaders and the relationships that you get to develop, but also just the hard training that you get going to these conferences. So I hope you'll all consider that. And I will give you an update on where we are with the committees that are coming up in the coming month.
Thanks, Charlie. All right, council around the table. Chris, you have anything you want to share or add or anything?
There was a CNFR meeting last night that I wasn't in town for, but when I get the minutes, I'll put that out. I suspect probably the only thing I need to do is get with our baseball parks people and reserve the ball fields like they have in the past. So I'll get those dates. And the Thursday meetings, don't want to sound like a wingnut. I would recommend not doing it. Carry all that on right here.
We actually had that conversation, I don't think you were here, about the Thursday, you're talking about the leadership meetings?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we had talked about is, since that sets the agenda we're gonna continue to have those meetings. You're welcome to come to those meetings, and Carter's gonna continue to bring us the updates to those meetings. But Charlie, if you wanna kind of talk about the background of that, and then what we're gonna try to
Well,
why you established it, I guess.
Well,
Having council members come.
well, the mayor-manager meetings, that's been a long-standing tradition, just because you can't really have a meeting without planning the meeting. You have to have, when we have an agenda for a council meeting, that's a result of a process, typically with the city manager saying, here are the things that we need to resolve, and so here's a proposed agenda. And then the mayor and the vice mayor and other council members, if they're present, can comment and say, we're overlooking this, I think this can wait, we've got too much stuff on here, or wouldn't this be a good time to talk about whatever, council members on boards. And so it's kind of an informal sort of discussion of, again, the priorities. So, and that all happens in advance so that staff has direction as to how to put the agenda together. So that's the purpose of the mayor-manager meeting. And again, the purpose of inviting council members was to just give people an opportunity to be part of that process. As far as just canceling the Thursday meetings, don't know how that would work, Chris. I
Do it
think-
here at the end of this for the following one.
No, yeah, go ahead.
My point is, there's a lot that goes on in those that isn't passed on. So several of mine were canceled recently here towards the end of the year, and I haven't been one for a long time. But I suspect that information about this retreat was discussed at those and probably understood by everybody, but that information never came until I got your meeting request. I don't believe that it's subversive or it's a conspiracy to withhold information. It just gets overlooked. So I know that there's a lot going on and being discussed there that never comes to the rest of us, blindsides us, and what's human reaction, you get annoyed at it. So if we could do it here at the end of one of these for the following one, it could be productive.
How long would that take, do you think, to do that?
I bet we could do it within the typical time frame that you allot for your items.
I guess I'd like Carter a chance to think about that, because, you know, in years past, for the city manager, who is our employee, I think there's been some reassurance, if you want to use that word, through a meeting with the mayor and the vice mayor, that, you know, anything that is a concern is sort of being discussed. And so, that, which is a lot of the reason to have a separate time for the mayor and the vice mayor to meet with the city manager. So I don't know how I'd feel about just not doing that. It would be a big change. I
You know how
guess
many
we-
years it's been done? Not that.
It was done when I was here before. I know that was a practice of Mr. Forson's for quite a while, so.
Did you have a similar process in Gillette?
It varies over time, you know, but yeah, we did.
I think Chris's concern is valid. I think one of the things that we need to be able to do is make sure, so for a long time, that mayor-manager meeting was just the mayor and the vice president, vice mayor. Charlie instituted it as a way of allowing people. I think that was our first year as on council.
Transparency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for transparency, to allow other council members to be a part of that, rotate it. Problem with it is that what we've got to do is, if we continue to do it, and I agree with Chris, is that the information that flows from those meetings, if somebody can't make it or isn't, we still have a schedule of people, that we have to be able to get that information disseminated to the council accurately and with fidelity, that what happened in that meeting gets transferred to the council. I think that Chris's concern is valid in that sense.
Is most of what is discussed though in your report?
I'd certainly try to be comprehensive in emails that I send you and so forth. You bet.
Because I appreciate those weekly updates. And maybe they just need to make sure that anything discussed in that Thursday meeting is shared.
Can I make a comment on
Yeah,
this?
please, Dallas.
I have to say, Charlie, I agree with Chris, because new guy here, I'm still the new guy, but I feel that I don't have as much information as you and Bob and Kaneen and Ray have had. Like you guys' involvement on the Joint Powers Board, I never felt like, I don't remember you ever telling me much about those meetings. I think towards the end, you came by to see me and showed me something you'd written down. I know that CADA has a joint, or has an audited financial statement. I don't know whether you've seen that. But I feel like I've gone to a couple of these meetings. I felt more informed being here. I never thought of tacking it on here, and that's what I was saying, having the whole council present for that, if they care to stay. If they don't care to stay, they can leave. Personally, I would stay because I want to be as informed as possible. I don't like, because sometimes I'll call council members to find out something and they're busy, I understand that, and I don't get a call back. I do at some point, but I'm usually trying to find out information. And I don't think any councilman should have the opportunity to be more well-informed than other councilmen. That's why I have the problem with the boards, because that councilman is more informed and busy, and then they come here and nobody wants to hear more stuff about the board they're on. If we appointed people to those boards who had to give us reports if they weren't on, we'd all be equally informed, and we wouldn't be biased, I don't think. So I don't know what other cities do, but I gotta believe that most cities, especially down in Las Vegas, that everything has to be before the camera and before the public, and because that's kind of, Charlie, a secret meeting when you guys come down, because I've been here, there's no press here, no cameras are on. There's 3 people and they're talking about the agenda, and I'm looking at the stuff and I'm thinking, this is great, and I'd like to know it every time. So I'd like to change these old ways that I think are antiquated and are not conducive to transparency on the part of the public. I want to be as informed as you are, Charlie. I want to be as informed as Bob is, and anybody else who's in a position of leadership. And I remember when I used to be at the Fire Rock, and here would come Kaneen and Patterson and you, and you're all sitting down at the one end having dinner discussing issues. And I thought, I don't know about that, because,
I don't remember that.
well, I've seen it. I've seen it, and maybe it wasn't you, it was this other guy that's about the Napa thing. But they were always there, and they were always discussing things, and I thought, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have gone to that meeting, because people were in there watching that. And I made a comment, is this where all the cool kids go? And somebody said, yeah. And that has always left a bad taste in my mouth about what the council does. So I think the more open it is, publicly, those work sessions, Dennis can come down, he can hear it, tell us we're lazy, we should be making decisions, but he'll see more about what's going on, and probably we won't get those comments.
How do you feel about that, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm absolutely pleased to do whatever council would like to do. We've been trying to refine the agenda so that it's not as long and frustrating. And so that'd be the only downside I would see, is it would extend the agenda. But if the concern is that council isn't feeling as adequately informed, I'd prefer to err on that side if that's the pervasive feeling of the group.
Just like right now, I have no idea what's going on in the fire department. I don't know whether you do, I don't know whether Charlie does, I don't know who does. I get a call from somebody from the press, what's going on in the fire department? I said, I don't like telling these people, I don't know anything. And so I'll bet you know things that are going on in the fire department I don't know about.
Actually, I don't. You probably know more than I do.
I don't know anything, so,
So that means you.
but I think we should know these things.
Well, let's try it. If you're okay, Carter, let's try it.
Absolutely.
And see how it works.
No problem.
Thank you. I have one
Yeah,
thing.
go right ahead.
And this is a monster that doesn't need to be. What do we need to do to officially change your title to vice mayor? Instead of, what do we call him? Well, we all call him vice mayor, that's what it is, so how do we make that official
That's a
so
good
there's
question.
no vice president of the mayorhood, you know, get rid of that. Can we do it right now? Can we make that
Make a
formal?
decree.
I don't think
What
that's
is
bound
the
in
official
statute, is
title?
it?
Vice President of
Vice
Council.
President.
It actually talks about electing a president and vice president of council, which you
And there is no president.
Decided your
Can-
local
can
rules to
we
call it
make-
vice mayor.
Can
that's
we
fine.
make in our local rules hereinafter referred to for eternity as the vice mayor?
I'm
Well,
good with that.
let me interject here, something, because I did have a comment about this. How he really is, and how you guys have treated this, and ladies, the ladies are gone, aren't they? Is he is the mayor-elect. That's what he is. Well, that's really what he is.
by
No,
law.
he's not. No, he's not.
Now, hold it, that's what happens. So, he's the mayor-elect.
Not always.
It
Well,
hasn't happened always that way.
I know.
The last one before Caneen was voted out of office. So he wouldn't have
But it's typically that's what it is, and so if, and I did have a suggestion about that, which was that you rotate the vice mayor every quarter. Because then guess what happens? This is something I read in John Maxwell, that you're reading the book, is that it gives everybody that experience. And we can see then everybody who they are. And then if all four of those people run for mayor at the end, fine. If one of them runs for mayor at the end, fine. But it gives people the experience of serving in that capacity. I just say, okay, it's one of those things he's never done, but it's something that it has been done in other jurisdictions. And what it does, according to Maxwell, if you are on that first level of leadership, where you're the leader because you're elected that way and they have to follow you, that isn't the same kind of leader you want as one where he teaches people and anyone could step into the mayorship if something happened. And to have a whole council of people that could be the mayor would be a really great idea, because we'd all be totally well informed. Because I really do believe that Bob and Charlie are the most informed people on the council by and large. And I want to be that well informed because I will do my people and my ward a better job. And so if that mayorship was rotated, or vice mayorship was rotated, and then you had 4 people or 3 people or whoever decides they want it, and they've all had this 3 months at least experience, if the 2 of you would have been elected vice mayor, you'd do it every other month, or 6 months for one and 6 months for the other, and then we have an election. But what really is the pressure there is it's the mayor-elect. Because you threw your name in, and you're going, well, God, Ray's been the vice mayor, he's done all this stuff, and blah, 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 but you're a good man, and you should be mayor someday. But I believe that you should truly. I think people should come through the vice mayor's job and get training so the rest of us can see it. And so I would suggest that be a consideration. I know it's totally different, but think about it.
Let's do one change at a time.
So Chris has vice mayor. I think everybody's supported. We just go with that instead of vice president.
That's all it takes, I'm happy with that. Unless you're happy with your mayor.
I'm good with it. If
No,
you-
I'm good.
Can I just call him Vice like I did?
Sure.
you?
Bob, you have anything?
Nothing real significant. I just wanted to thank Charlie for starting this, having additional people come in on the planning session. And, you know, when we started doing this, I think it was basically, the agenda's pretty well set when we come in there, and you talk about it. There may be some things that move around for one reason or another. And I know there are sometimes things that do come up, but I don't think they're significant to what transpires overall in the council, because just laying out that agenda, you gotta plan a meeting. If you don't plan a meeting, you don't get anything done. And so I see that as mayor and vice mayor's job, and I appreciate the invitation to show up once in a while. And it turns out you show up about maybe once a month. Well, you can't show up once a month.
How long have you been on the council?
This is in my 5th year.
How long have you been here?
Six now.
And you've been the mayor once, and is this just your second time to be vice mayor? And you haven't been the mayor or vice mayor either?
But anyway, other than that, we've got Amoco Joint Powers Board coming up, and I will see that those notes get put in the what do we call that magic thing? You go get
The
your-
information pack.
The information packet, yeah. I will see that that gets done. Chamber has InfoShare on Friday, and that's nothing but a kind of a social club. You buy your own lunch and you tell people what you know about what's going on in your particular neck of the woods. And then we've got OYD meeting on Monday the 15th, I believe, and that's it. Thank you.
Will, did you have a clarification?
I do, thank you, Your Honor. Just, and as far as Councilman Walsh, as far as calling vice president, vice mayor, that to me is just a matter of form, and I'm fine with it. Actually, it's a lot less awkward than the numbered vice president. But as far as any rotating of duties throughout the year, 15.4201 actually does require that the council first meeting after the election, or this article, in the first meeting of each regular election thereafter shall elect from their number a president of the council to be the mayor and a vice president of the council, and that's an annual thing. So it is actually statutorily laid out there. You know, I said for local convenience and less awkward phrasing, vice mayor works for me because half the time I slip up and
What's
say
that,
it anyway.
what's that statute number?
15.4201.
15.4.
It's the first one under the city manager form of government.
When in doubt, you always check the statutes. Do you remember
Does
what
it
I
define
said?
And you give me a hard time for carrying the books.
Thank you for doing that.
Does it define the term?
What's that?
It defines the term as a year.
It talks about the first meeting of the year, that's when council elects the
Does it
leadership.
say what happens if you don't like what the guy's doing? Is he just locked in for the year no matter what?
It's a great opportunity.
And we
to
might be
report
getting into
on
that in
people.
ethics.
We dock
And
his-
I don't wanna go there.
We
Paul.
dock his pay.
Sean?
I'm just glad that we're gonna talk about food trucks. That was the only thing I was gonna bring up tonight, so. Anything else?
Great. Jesse?
Well, Mayor, this is a new year, first work session. So I'm probably going to bring up a couple of things that I brought up under previous leadership. I had a council meeting, or not a council meeting. I hosted Pints and Politics at Frontier Brewing. Great turnout. A lot of people turned out. There was even a state representative there, and I really appreciated that. It was good insight to hear, you know, some of the feedback that they're dealing with, and then have, you know, constituents reach out to them. Well, why does this happen? And really, the underlying thing that's always a common denominator is the lack of information that council is able to put out there. You know, it's seen as a lack of transparency, and I don't think, you know, we have any issue telling people why we voted in a particular direction, or why the majority of council, for that matter, voted in a particular direction. So it'd be great to see, you know, the use of media outlets for key issues that we're going to discuss. We already know prior to what is going to be the hot topic, what is going to be in the newspaper or online 15 minutes after we just voted in a particular direction. So we already know that. One good observation, or I guess suggestion, that a person had that was there was having an FAQ under maybe that particular agenda item of, you know, how is this going to impact you, or what is the increased fee? So if we're going to use the franchise fee, for instance, you know, how much is this going to be? What is the money going towards? How long is it going to be there for? So right there off the bat, we just released an agenda with probably the most frequently asked questions that are going to come up during that time, so we can already quelch most of that garbage that you see on social media. And then at that point, we have informed citizens, or at least people that we can inform if they bring an issue to us, say, hey, look, here's the agenda, and it also has this back page under, resolution 1, item A, or whatever the case is. So I thought that was a good idea. So it'd be great to, like I said, have that transparency, whether it's taking a column out of the editorial board. I don't know if we have a PIO person that is under the city manager, half not really under city council at all, but utilizing that to the highest degree. Our police department's killing it on social media. They're doing an outstanding job. I really appreciate them, not only reaching out to citizens, but also keeping them informed, hey, this is what's going on, and a lot of good ideas out there. So I really appreciate what I think Hatcher is doing. So if we could possibly entertain that idea with council leadership, I would appreciate it. Staying informed, I think that's important, and I would see as council leadership out of the Thursday's meeting that coming from you guys personally to councils. What did you discuss with our city manager? I'd like to see that. Since we're talking about maybe changing charter ordinances or whatever, the fundamentals of our government here in the city of Casper, 3 elected members at large, so we would basically reduce 1 from each ward essentially. So we would still have our specific districts. I think Douglas, everybody's at large, but in the city of Casper, having 3 people elected by everybody within the city of Casper, I think that'd be a great idea. So it's, at that point, you kind of have that accountability, and that's something that people talked about during that Pints and Politics kind of informal listening session that I hosted was, who's accountable? We had so much going on last year. All right, well, go to your councilman. Well, hey, I'm not over. All right, go to your city manager. Well, hey, I report to the council. So that's another issue that people have with the weak mayor system, that people, they see it as almost broken. They elect us, but we can't really give out that kind of information. So with the strong mayor system, for instance, you have somebody where I go to you and I say, what are you doing? And if you're not doing a good job, or you're not releasing information, or you're being secretive as to why you may have gotten rid of an employee that reports to you, you're voted out, you're gone, see ya. So, I think it's a valid concern, and I would hope that we could work at just trying to keep people informed, keeping up with transparency and public perception. I think that's key, and these are all my opinions, but I like the idea of members at large where people serve the entire community as opposed to one particular district. You have a lot of issues. Well, talk to your councilman. You have a councilman maybe supporting downtown. Well, you're not even living in downtown. Where are you supporting downtown? Which is, we all live in the city of Casper, but it's not a bad idea. Just throwing that out there. Apart from that, I think that is primarily it. I was hoping to see, I guess this is the first meeting, but when can we get smart meters? When is that an option for water meters? I think this study was supposed to be in by January. I'm just interested to see when we could provide people with smart water meters, can control with an app. I know app is still on the grid to be discussed at some point. That's another thing I would like to see, is just people being in touch with their local government, whether it's their water bill or trash collection, or maybe it's a security event that we could put an alert on an app and, oh wow, okay, this is going on, I'm going to avoid this area. You can even put press releases right there. People can see all the press releases, or hey, what's going on at the rec center. So it's just keeping people in touch with the services that we provide and what's being done at these particular meetings. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Dallas?
I'd like to see us pass a resolution that says we can't sign a contract over 4 years in length.
Say that again.
That we don't sign contracts over 4 years in length, and that at the escape clause, and I'm using the one that you guys did with Bill Schmidt, where we are bound by 20 years and he can get out in a month. I want to see that. That's just, that brings my legal blood to a boil. I would like to see a resolution that says that the escape clause has to be mutual. If he wants to get out in a month, he'll get out in a month. There's a legal reason for that, and it's called the Mariano case, which I always refer to, because what it basically says is when a new council is reformed, even by one member, that the contracts can be declared null and void in many cases. And that way, we're not saddled with these things for years, for 20 years. Binding people for 20 years to pay money out is, I think, we're not doing a very good job of doing that. So I'd like to see that as a resolution. I'd like to see the council removal ordinance repealed, and that we do like we did the liquor laws, we just say we will follow the state law on that issue. I think that removal ordinance was ill-conceived, cost you a lot of money, didn't work, and it's unconstitutional, and it makes me uncomfortable. Because I don't think we should be trying to throw people off of a board where they're elected. I think that's up to the electorate, unless the person's committed a felony or something of that nature, which the state statute covers. Is that on the agenda somewhere?
Councilman, it is. I believe it's on the 23rd of February.
Yeah. A question for Ray and Bob. Have you guys ever seen the audited financial statement for CADA through your Joint Powers Board?
I believe so, yes.
And is there some reason you haven't given that to the council?
I don't know. And there's no reason we can't.
Well, but I don't think I've ever seen it, so.
We can get it to you. I mean,
It's public document.
Well, I'd like to see it, but I think if you guys.
Well, I'll have to go dig it up. That's all.
Well, if you're on the board, I think you should report to the council what you learned, without us having to beg and ask and you never see it. I'd like to see that policy changed. Plus, I think people serve too long on those boards. If you don't wanna change it where we find two people that we assign to the board, I think it's called draining the swamp. That's what a big issue is. I'd like to get on that board, and I think Chris would like to get on that board. I think you guys have been on long enough, and I think we should shift these boards around so that other members can have the experience and see the information and be as fully informed as you are. I don't think people should get in certain positions where they hang on to the same boards forever. I just don't think it's a good, healthy thing for the council. So I'd like people to think that over. Thank you.
Joey,
No, nothing else?
I don't think I have anything. So we have thank yous for this, the legislator dinner. A couple ways we can do it is if you guys want to sign it as well, you're more than welcome to do that. I can sign it, address it, or address them from me, or we can have you guys sign it, whatever is more convenient. We want to do that a little bit later on, but I have them here if you want to sign those. Have a little, make a note if you'd like to do that. So.
Oh,
Thank you.
Tremendous loss to the community to lose Leslie.
Yes.
Leslie, of course, had dinner with her Christmas night. A wonderful dinner, wonderful conversations. And you sat there just like here, thinking everything was wonderful and great. Actually, what I'd like to do, Mr. Mayor, I move that we have a 1-minute moment of silence in honor of Leslie Blythe right now.
Okay.
Thank Thank you.
Anything else?
Move we go to executive session.
Second.
Motion to move in. Go.
Do you wanna, what was the consensus on those cards? Are we gonna pass them around, sign them, or?
You know, the names have not been put on it yet. Yeah, would you mind?
Okay, thank you.
I understand the funeral's gonna be this summer, right? I understand the funeral's not gonna be this summer.
Yeah, they're gonna have some type of celebration.
So we'll still meet this Thursday.
I won't be here.
And we'll see from there.
You're talking about the mayor manager? Yeah, I won't be here.
Okay. Sorry, gentlemen, thank you.
How you doing? Good. See, you're not interested in that job. You're not interested.
Mr. Manager, is that camera on?
Yes.
How do you,
We're turning off right now, okay.
Yeah.
I think the
Spread
wards and.
well, people have said they're hearing us on those microphones when we take a little break, and they're hearing us talking, I'll turn the microphone.
Really?
Just like I think.
We have implemented a kill switch for out there, so that when we're breaking,
Yeah.
A good idea.
kill switch, yeah, yeah. That helps.
Somebody heard you and Bob complaining about, or you and Charlie complaining about something else.
Oh, was it
I
all right?
wouldn't agree to it, but no.
That one day when we took a break, we were walking around, I forget what meeting that was.
I reached out to a council.
Because the three of us were down there talking about stuff, and somebody heard that. I got a text, turn your mic off, we can hear you.
Yeah, you might be able to hear more than when we're trying to talk into it. You have to remember to get right there.
Yeah.